Say hello, everybody. Well, by the way, we have the cameras off because of bandwidth issues. So anyway,
Yeah,
say hello.
Just gonna, I'll just go on real quick. Hey, as you guys see me, I hope you can see me. And yeah, I'm gonna go off because it eats up bandwidth. I don't know if that interrupted the flow of if you guys could hear it properly or not.
You're good. You're good.
Good?
You're good. You're good. Yeah. So far, the connection is good.
Yeah. Okay, great. Great. Yeah, I we were having just to background, we were having a really fascinating conversation about the motivation for my my detention. And I want to emphasize that I cannot discuss the details of this investigation that is occurring, as I am still in Kharkov, and I am subject to the legal authority of the various law enforcement officials here. And so I am not going to discuss in any detail any of that situation. But yeah. And so that's all I have to say. All I want to do really in this conversation is catch up on what the hell happened over the last week.
Where should we begin? Well, like I was telling you, Gonzalo, you were the news this last week.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I will begin with an article in the London Times. It's relatively short, and it's Ukraine war revitalized. Russia can still win. Western intelligence warns, and we're told, this is from the London Times, President Putin could still win the war in Ukraine, which is now expected to last until the end of the year. Well, we can put the path about the end of the year to one side. And they said the Russian army outnumbers Ukrainian forces in the east 3-1. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't, could encircle and destroy a significant proportion, the officials warned. They said Russia could even launch a new assault on Kiev or deprive the Ukrainian capital of access to the Black Sea in a worst-case scenario. And then it says, Western intelligence suggests that Moscow has made tactical adjustments. The main theater of the war in the eastern Donbass is flat, with firm terrain, which offers Russian artillery and tanks an advantage compared with the forests north of Kiev. And Putin has appointed an experienced commander to oversee Russia's operation, General Alexander Dvornikov. And there is a real possibility Russia could surround Ukrainian forces and grind them down over time, which would be enough for Putin to claim it as a win. Consolidating control over Donbass and Crimea could be seen as a success. Now, to my mind, that is the London Times. Remember, the London Times was the first British newspaper to publish an article back in March admitting that the primary objective of the Russians was the encirclement and destruction of the Ukrainian army in Donbass. That is an article that now prepares the British leadership for the fact that Ukraine is losing.
I cannot believe that they're saying, the Russians could win.
Oh, I know.
What are they smoking over there? I mean, come on,
Well,
and then the notion that this lasts until the end of the year is a little bit laughable because, at the pace we're going, we're 8 weeks into this war, approximately, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And at this pace, another 8 weeks, and this is a catastrophe for Ukraine.
Yes.
Because the youth of Ukraine is being thrown away for nothing. They should negotiate a settlement, and they should understand that the situation has changed radically. They burned too many bridges. They went back on the Minsk agreement, which, if you all recall, was the reason that this war did not happen in 2015, because it was happening in 2015, and people seem to forget that. And the only reason the Russians called it off was because Angela Merkel, sweet-talked Vladimir Putin into the Minsk agreements, and the Russians backed off and didn't follow through on what they were doing in 2015, which was invading and taking over Ukraine. And so now the Russians have no incentive and to negotiate, no belief that the Ukrainians will live up to their word, because they failed insofar as the Minsk agreements are concerned. All they can do now, the Ukraine, is end this needless loss of life, because that's what it is. It is pointless at this point. And I am perfectly aware of my situation. But I just have to emphasize this, that the needless loss of life, because there is no victory, unfortunately. And it's only going to be misery and the loss of life. And it is just a tragedy beyond comprehension. And I lay the blame at the feet of the leadership of the West, because the leadership of the West in the UK, the EU, and the United States government, they are willing to throw away the lives of Ukrainian boys who have their whole lives ahead of them for nothing, because nothing can be won at this point. I'm sorry for losing my cool, but I just have to make that point.
You're absolutely right to lose your cool, because I feel exactly the same way, and I completely share your sentiments. I think throwing away lives in this
Alexander,
way is...
Alexander, sorry to interrupt. I have to say something, because in a weird way, this past week has been sort of like a blip. It's almost like it just a lost week, and I'm back. And so I just want to say something, and I want. I know that so many people were so concerned, and I am reading the comments as we're talking, and there's so many kind words. I thank you. It's very moving to know that so many people cared about me. It truly was, and I thank you very, very much. And you guys, you boys.
I think we've lost you, Gonzalo, but if you can hear us, can I say, repeat publicly what I was saying before we started, when we were speaking, privately, which is that you have many, many friends around the world who greatly admire you and hugely respect and value what you have been doing over the last few weeks.
Thank you, Alexander, and I want to thank both of you in particular, and Alex Christoforou, who's always just, you guys are aces. And I just want to tell you, the audience, your kindness, and it's just so appreciated. It means the world to me, and I can never pay you. I can never repay you your kindness towards me, but I will certainly carry your kindness forward towards anybody else who needs this kind of support. I want to tell you something else, by the way. Before, in that really quick stream that I did with Alex, just a few hours ago, all of my YouTube, I don't have access to any of my YouTube channels or any of my Telegram channels or anything of the sort, or my Twitter feed, because my phone was confiscated and all the passwords have been changed, and so I don't have access to it. I do not know if I will get access to them again or not. It doesn't really matter. I mean, I can just make a new feed and make a new channel. I have made a new Twitter feed. It's called Gonzalo Lira 1968, and you can find it right now. And I've posted a couple of missives. And if you
Gonzalo Lira 1968.
Yes, exactly.
Gonzalo Lira 1968. I'm going to put it in the chat. Gonzalo Lira 1968. Okay, go on.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that I'm so humbled. Okay, really, and I just want to tell you that, and I want to tell you that I can't repay you, but I can, in that stupid book, Pay It Forward, of trying to help other people who are in similar circumstances. That is what I will most certainly dedicate myself to in these very trying times. Okay, and you have you who are in chat, you have my commitment. Okay, you have my word as a man that is going to be my my focus. Okay, okay. So Alexander, I'm sorry for cutting you off. What were you saying?
You have no reason to apologize, Gonzalo, and please feel absolutely free to cut me off at any time in any program. I do have a tendency sometimes to ramble on, but on the question of young Ukrainian lives being lost to no purpose, I am completely in agreement. You have missed, I think, the drama of Mariupol. What we have is a situation where Ukrainian troops of various descriptions, some of them holding beliefs I mean, I abhor, but they're young men and women who, deserve to live. They're now all trapped inside the Azovstal factory. The whole of the city has been completely cleared of Ukrainian troops by the Russian military. The Russians have repeatedly offered these people in Azovstal the option of surrendering. Now, the Russians claim, and I have to say, I'm sure what they say is true, is that the authorities in Kiev have instructed the people in Azovstal not to surrender. The people in Azovstal have been sending out extremely desperate videos asking to be transferred to a third country. I don't fully understand what that means. But in any event, Putin yesterday made a decision that the factory itself will not be stormed, but that it will be placed under permanent blockade. I don't know whether you're aware of that, but that's the position.
Alex told me about it when Alex and I were talking privately before the show, and I thought at the time, number one, Putin is absolutely right. There's no reason to needlessly lose lives by trying to storm the Azovstal, because now it is no longer a military operation; it is a police situation. You have basically, in the sense that nothing can be gained. There's no way that those soldiers in the Azovstal can somehow break out and conquer Mariupol again. So Mariupol is over. Except, as the saying goes, it's all over but the shouting. And these individuals are the shouting. Now, from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that number one, there's no water there. There's no fresh water.
Yes.
Food, because there's a saying of the twos. You can last 2 minutes without air, 2 hours with in freezing water, 2 days without water, and 2 weeks without food. Now, the issue of water is the real issue. Food, you can go a long time without water. I myself have done water fasts. The longest I ever did was 13 days of no food whatsoever, only water. It was just a crazy thing I wanted to try out. But the point is, you can last a long time without food. Water, forget it. You need water. And so, especially in those conditions, high stress, it's probably going to be surprisingly hot down there. So, I think that is going to be the number one issue for these guys. And not attacking it seems perfectly reasonable, to tell you the truth. Just wait them out.
Yes. I have to say, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And I do personally think that it's highly likely that at some point we will see these people surrendering. Now, there's been, Russian military blaring out through loudspeakers, telling people to give up in Azovstal, and that's, I'm sure, what's happening. Now, there's been lots of movements in Donbass. Yesterday, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry, the Ukrainian government, in fact, said that 42 villages had been captured by the Russians on yesterday, 42. And the other thing was, a couple of days ago, actually, I think it was on the 16th of April, so a day after events, after you were arrested, on the 16th of April, the Russian Defense Ministry put Ukrainian losses, what they called irretrievable losses, at 24,000. Now, I've been uncertain what that word irretrievable means, but I've come to the conclusion it means dead and severely wounded. It doesn't include prisoners. That's what I think. And I have to say, if so, that gives us an idea of the intensity of operations, because the Russians put the number at 15,000 on the 25th of March, 14,000 irretrievable losses on the 25th of March. That had risen to another and by another 10,000 by the 16th of April. So, a huge, constant numbers of people being killed. Now, these are Russian figures. Ukrainians give completely different numbers, but we are also now getting, and this is from the American media, huge amount of reports from the American media that the US is astonished at the amount of military material Ukraine is losing, and that they're finding it impossible to keep up, and that Ukraine loses in a day the amount of weapon systems that the US has been delivering, which was intended to last it out for a week. So go on, Alex.
Yeah, no, I just want to jump in real quick. Gonzalo, can you hear us?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to kind of tell the chat that we were talking privately, us three, and Gonzalo, me, and Alexander, and Gonzalo was like, we were talking about the news because Gonzalo wanted to find out what's going on in the world, and then we decided, why don't we just go live and have this conversation about what's going on in the news, like just catching up, so we can just kind of catch up with everybody. But I just want to say, Gonzalo, there's a lot of people in the chat who are concerned, saying, are you okay? Are you going to be able to get out and all of these things? I just want to kind of let everyone know in the chat why we're here talking about, what's going on in the news, because that's what we wanted to do, just kind of catch up on everything that was going on. But I just want to let you know, Gonzalo, a lot of people are in the chat and they're asking, are you going to be okay? Can you get out? And all of this, just a lot of concern for you, Gonzalo.
Yeah, I so appreciate it. And AP says that I'm a deep fake. That hurts my little AI feelings, by the way. I just want to emphasize that. I try so hard to beat the Turing test, and now you're catching up. Seriously. My situation here in Kharkov is I want to remain. I see no reason to. Well, I mean, it sounds bizarre, but my reasons for staying have not changed. I want to see this through to the end. And at this time, I cannot legally leave. And as I am here in Ukraine under the legal authority of the legitimate law enforcement, I am staying put. And so there we are. I'm not going to discuss the details of my specific case because, number one, I cannot legally. I signed a document specifying that I would not discuss the investigation that is proceeding, investigation where I am being investigated by the legitimate authority here in Kharkov, and that's all I have to say about that. I don't want to get into the whole legal act, and I don't want to say something that will antagonize anybody here in Kharkov insofar as the legal situation is concerned. I'm sorry for using my words so carefully, but
In fact, can I say, as somebody who has experience of these things, I think it is better we don't discuss this in public at all. Even in terms of what the circumstances and that led up to your arrest, because I think we must be extremely careful what we say. And I think I'm right in saying, Gonzalo, that you actually have legal counsel now giving you advice. Am I right in thinking that?
Yes. And there's some people in chat who claim that I'm making it up. Okay, if you want to think that. Although Alex Christoforou, he has seen via camera some documentation of my arrest, and so I can point to other people who can confirm my status.
Yes,
they're always and I should ignore them. Sorry.
I think you should ignore them, and I have to say, I think people who make those kind of claims, well, I leave it to them to reconcile themselves with their conscience, because I have to say, I consider that kind of conduct absolutely outrageous. And I think
Well,
that at a time
okay,
like this to make comments like that, but let's move on anyway.
yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, yeah, because I remember one time I did a stream where I was totally thrown by trolls. Okay,
Yes.
and never feed
Yeah.
the trolls. That's what they want. Okay, so yeah.
Yes.
So anyway,
Yeah.
insofar as the situation on the ground in Ukraine is concerned, I want to ask you: has there been independent confirmation as to what is going on with the Eastern Army? Um,
Yes.
is it a slow grind, or has there been any kind of breakthrough?
Well, it is a slow grind, and my very clear impression is that that's exactly what the Russians want.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
I think that is I think that is the plan. I think that has been the plan all along. There's talk about, as I said, the Ukrainians yesterday said 42 villages have been captured by the Russians in a single day. The Ukrainians have lost control of a town called Rubizhnoye, which has been confirmed. Apparently, they're in the process of losing another town called Popaznaya. I mean, I'm not, as I said, the expert on these tactical things, but as I said, my understanding is that it is a slow grind. And that article I read to you from the London Times seems to say the same. I mean, the word about I would repeat it again. There is a real possibility, and this is a quote from someone. The words "real possibility" are in quotation marks. Russia could surround Ukrainian forces and grind
Yeah,
them down over time. And the words "grind them down over time" are again a quote from this official. So that's clearly the plan, and that's clearly what seems to be happening. By the way, I should say also that this morning there was talk about a Ukrainian attempt to launch a counteroffensive towards Belgorod, which is, of course, in Russia. But the word again, and this is purely from the Russians, is that this counteroffensive was defeated and that the force that was sent was destroyed. Now, I can't confirm that. This is all Russian information. But, I've up to now consistently found the Russians reasonably reliable when they provide information like this. In fact,
well,
I've never known them not to be.
yeah. On the Moskva sinking, they never
Yeah.
confirmed. Did they ever confirm that it had been a missile? Because I personally
No.
think it was a missile. I do not
Yeah.
believe in coincidences in these circumstances, and it seems it seems outlandish, rather not outrageous, outlandish, to think that right in the middle of the war, when everybody's at their highest alert, a random electrical fire would break out that essentially incapacitated such an important military asset.
Yes.
So have they
There
confirmed that it was a missile, or are they keeping it to themselves?
They're keeping it to themselves, and I predict that they will do until they've got a full report about what happened and a complete explanation. And I suspect they will keep it to themselves until the war is over. To be honest, I'm inclined to agree with you. By the way, I mean I think coincidence pushes it too far, but I mean I don't know what it was. And by the way, Gonzalo, on this issue of the Moskva, there are enormous numbers of rumors flying around. So one has to be extremely careful because a lot of things have been circulating which are to be treated, I think, with great care. There was one
Out of
claim.
curiosity, what were those rumors? And this is
Well,
out of
I
curiosity.
will give you one example. A man called Anton Gerashchenko, who I presume you know about. He's a senior official in the Ukrainian Interior Ministry.
Mhm.
Circulated claims that the captain of the ship had drowned, went down with the ship.
How
Except,
would he
of course,
know? How would he know?
yes, except a few days later, he turned up at a ceremony with the rest of the crew in Sevastopol.
Oh
So, I
man,
mean, that's just one example.
but you know something. This is you guys know that I used to do Coach Red Pill content, which is basically advice to young men as to how to live a life. And here's a object lesson: never tell a lie, because it
Yeah,
always comes out.
yeah,
Always, no
yeah,
exception. And
yeah,
it's easy for a lie to come out, and especially when you claim that somebody's dead, like in this
yeah.
situation. And the guy shows up at. Excuse me. Did you say that he appeared at an award ceremony?
Yes,
Medal?
right. What happened was this: when
That's
the
even
crew,
worse.
when the crew arrived in Sevastopol, the commander of the Russian Navy came and addressed them all, and I believe he did hand out awards, and the captain was there.
Oh man. So yeah, and my thinking at the time of this incident, I did a big effort post on my Telegram channel, which, as I've said and I'm reiterating, I no longer have control over that.
Yeah.
So anything that appears as of April 15th forward, I it's not me. Okay, but anyway, my thinking was that it was a successful attack, and I think it was dreamed up by the forces at Odessa. And I think that what happened was that it was not okayed by Kiev, and Alex and I were talking about this, and I had to crow because that effort post, I basically said that Kiev would not be happy about this necessarily because they had not played out the Medvedchuk card yet. They had Viktor Medvedchuk, that they had suddenly captured him, which was absurd, as we all know, because for those of you who don't know, Viktor Medvedchuk was the leader of the major opposition party to Zelensky. And he was accused of all kinds of nefarious deeds. And of course, it was nonsense. It was all just to sideline him politically. And he was under house arrest. And when the hostilities broke out and the conflict began, all of a sudden he claimed that it was claimed rather that Medvedchuk had slipped away from house arrest and was underground and presumably in Russia. And then magically, what was it, about 10 days ago, he appeared that, and it was claimed that he had been recaptured. And some pictures of him were shown that made him look, he looked the worse for wear, quite frankly.
Yes.
And it was claimed that they had captured him and all the rest of it. My thinking was that they were pulling him out because they wanted to use him as a negotiating card with Putin. Because for those of you who don't know, again, Viktor Medvedchuk, who was a politician here in Ukraine, had longstanding personal ties to Vladimir Putin, and there was the assumption clearly on the part of the Zelensky regime that they could somehow use him as a bargaining chip. And what was fascinating was that the Russian foreign ministry, not even the office of the president, but the Russian foreign ministry said, well, Viktor Medvedchuk is a Ukrainian citizen. He is not a Russian citizen, so we're not going to trade him for anybody because he's not our problem, which I thought was the correct approach, of course, on a tactical level in such a situation. But I think what had happened was that the Zelensky regime was still going to try to figure out a way to leverage the Medvedchuk situation when it was suddenly interrupted by the Moskva sinking or attack and then sinking. And I think that the Zelensky regime was, quite frankly, I think that they might have been pissed off at the Moskva incident, which goes to show you that they are playing just a purely political game. They're not playing the we are at war, so we have to win game. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I agree, and I would also add that I get the distinct feeling that the Pentagon was extremely unhappy about the whole affair. They were very, very careful to be very slow to confirm the Ukrainian claims about the sinking of the Moskva, and they only did so through anonymous officials. I get the impression that there's a complicated story here, which we don't know the whole details of. There are a lot of people in both Kiev and Washington and Moscow were probably taken by surprise and are very angry about it. And I think there's been some hard words exchanged. And I think there's also been a tacit agreement perhaps, to play down the whole incident, both from every side. So as I said, there's a lot that we don't fully know, but that's all I'm going to say about that. Now, the other thing I wanted to just say, Gonzalo, which has come up very recently, over the last few hours, in fact, is that the EU has been tiptoeing towards announcing an embargo on Russian imports.
Yeah, Alex told me.
Oil.
I'm laughing.
And now, and now Janet Yellen has come out and essentially put the kibosh on it. She said no, and I'm reading this from the Hill. Yeah. Yellen, European ban on Russian energy may do more harm than good. during a press conference, this is from I'm reading from the Hill now. During a Thursday press conference, Yellen said it was essential for the European Union to end its dependence on Russian oil, natural gas, and coal, but a total embargo may do little to hinder Russia's economy, whilst crippling Europe with staggering price increases. We need to be careful when we think about a complete ban on, say, oil imports. And sure enough, a few hours later, we get information from Josep Borrell, no less, saying that some EU members will veto any collective ban on Russian oil. So the European Union currently has no plans of introducing a collective ban on Russian oil supplies. EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, said. Now, it's interesting. It's all covering the Americans.
Alex and I were talking about this, and Alex told me that the Americans are giving, are opening up these strategic petroleum reserves. And
yes.
Alex, I'm not sure if I was correct. You were saying that there was a 1 million barrels a day or something?
Well, they've opened. Absolutely. Well, the Bloomberg has reported that the Biden White House they've got 3 ships moving towards Europe carrying the strategic petroleum reserves to Europe last week.
Yeah. So of course, Janet Yellen would be saying, no, don't cut off the Russian oil, because basically it would make Europe far more dependent on the United States for oil. And the United States is a net oil importer because of the Biden administration policies. So it would, it's bad enough that the European economy would sink. It would also drag down the American economy right quick in this inflationary spiral. So exactly. Of course she would be against it. Yeah.
That's exactly what she's saying.
Morons. They're morons.
Yes. Exactly. I mean, the other thing, and I have to say this, the thought immediately struck me that she must be extremely concerned that an announcement of a EU oil ban now would drive up the price of oil to stratospheric levels in the run-up to the November midterms. So I wonder whether politics is also playing a role in all of this. But anyway, we were hearing lots about this oil ban a few days ago. But as I said, it looks as if Janet Yellen and the administration are actually calling a stop to it. And as I said, Borrell seems to confirm that that's not going to happen now. So that's perhaps again illustrating that things are not going according to plan, or at least someone's plan. I have a telephone call ringing, and I suspect it's about you, Gonzalo. I will be gone.
And Gonzalo, I don't know if you saw the message I sent you in the private chat. And for everyone wants to get in touch with Gonzalo now to get some statements from you. So Gonzalo, I don't know if you want to pop into the private chat and see.
Yeah,
what I sent you.
No
big deal. Yeah.
Let me, to tell you the truth, I'm rather discombobulated and trying to, get my head around everything that's. The
internet moves fast.
Yeah. Well, not only that, I gotta say, that the week of internet detox has been very beneficial. I'll tell you that right now. Okay. It was the first day, no internet. I got the shakes bad, and I was like in Midnight Express, or something like that. I was just completely freaking out. And now it's like all of this information is just a little bit overwhelming. But anyway, what else has been going on, Alex? And while we wait for Alexander to get back, I'm just like, what the hell, man? I mean, clown world,
clown world, man. Absolutely, clown world. Are you a tennis fan, Gonzalo?
Yeah, sure.
Well, Wimbledon is
Daniil Medvedev
and Belarusian, by the way.
I bet they're not allowing him to play Wimbledon.
Russian and Belarusian tennis players are, for the moment, banned.
Yeah, I'm not a follower of tennis, but I know the game, of course, and sometimes I follow it and pick it up, and so I have actually never seen Daniil Medvedev play, but I understand he's the second best in the world. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. By the way, as a Serbian, is Djokovic Is he playing, or is he?
I think he is slated to play. Yeah, no, I think he's slated to play. But he came out with a statement the other day, and he said it's not right to ban people because they're Russian.
Well, here's the issue. This is collective punishment, and I thought that in the West, we heirs of the Enlightenment liberalism were opposed to collective punishment, to collective guilt. I thought that we, as a society in the West, believe that guilt is individual, and that no people, no race can be found guilty collectively of any crime, because I thought that that was the ideal of the Western liberal democracies. And clearly, this is not the case. Look, what I'm about to say is this Russophobia, which is obvious. I'm not saying it as, oh, I am pro-Russian or pro-Putin or pro anything. No, I am anti-discrimination, anti-racism. This is actual racism. Okay. Or racism or bigotry of the worst sort, when you ascribe collective guilt to an entire nationality. Now, insofar as what has happened politically between Russia and Ukraine, and militarily between Russia and Ukraine, see, a tennis player, he is obviously innocent of this, because number one, he does not make any of the political decisions. Number two, he does not carry a weapon and go into battle. Okay, he is a tennis player, essentially an entertainer. Okay, and so for him to be blamed, and for any Russian, it's just absurd. It's wrong. It's like, what are they doing? Because they are throwing away every major principle of the West and they're showing in a way that's so grotesque that all of the liberal principles were just window dressing. Were just nonsense. Were just words that were thrown around to get their way. That's what it looks like, and it's a horrible look, if you ask me.
I'm back. Can I just say it was about you, Gonzalo? I'll tell you what it was afterwards.
Okay.
Lots of people want to speak to you, but anyway, I'll put that aside. But briefly, you're absolutely right. As a British person living in Britain, somebody who used to do lots of discrimination law cases in my day, I was once quite a well-known discrimination lawyer. This is a long time ago. I'm utterly horrified by what Wimbledon has done. I understand that the association that is involved in ranking tennis players, has also spoken out against it. I personally believe that this action is illegal. I think it is a gross breach of the various discrimination acts that we have in Britain, and which Britain, to a great extent, pioneered. I find it deeply un-British. I mean, it's something I just don't recognize in my own country, and I'm shocked about it. But there is something else which I find even more shocking, and that is this: that Russian individuals, Russian businesses, Russian companies that find themselves in this kind of position apparently have great difficulty gaining access to legal representation that would enable them to contest these things in court. And I'm hearing, I can't confirm this, but I'm hearing that the reason is that they are coming under enormous pressure. British lawyers are being told that if you do act for Russian clients, it won't go well for you. Now, if that is true, and I in fact am quite sure that it is true, and this all originated at the time of the Skripal affair, by the way, when there were the Russian embassy found it very difficult to bring proceedings under the Vienna Convention for precisely that reason in British courts. But if that is true, that is simply appalling. I mean, in Britain, it is a fundamental legal principle that people have a right to representation. And if Russians have been denied representation purely because they are Russians, well, I have to say, I think that is even worse than this illegal and disgraceful step of banning Russian tennis players from Wimbledon, and Belarusian tennis players as well, by the way.
Yeah, and somebody in chat also said that even Formula One racers.
Yeah,
this is just dumb. I insist. I go back to the point I wanted to make, is that it makes all of the principles that built Western civilization ring hollow. This is outrageous. Hello? Am I still there? Hello?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Alexander dropped off. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
But it's me and you. We hear you. You're fine. You're clear. You're clear.
Okay. Well, I'm sure Alexander will get back on. But it's in the West, there are certain principles that are the bedrock, the foundation of Western civilization. To betray them this way, it not only makes those ideals hollow, but it makes the support for our civilization collapse underneath us. And what I find just despicable is that the current leadership crop across Europe, the British Isles, and the North American continent, and Australia and New Zealand, they are so they're so craven, they're so small, they're so little. They are people without any kind of they have no moral conscience. I find it outrageous because there's no question that these people are intelligent, but they have no soul. They have no conscience. That is what I find outrageous because, you can find a very dumb farmer who is a better man because he might be dumb, but he knows right from wrong. And he knows that there are certain things that you can't do because they're just wrong. And these very intelligent people who are in charge of things in the West, they don't have that moral sense at all. It's almost as if it's been ripped out of them somehow, or eroded from them, or deliberately removed somehow in some very complex operation that removed any kind of moral sensibility. That's what seems to be the case in the West, and it's outrageous.
Yeah,
it's a tragedy.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
It is.
So before we went live, Gonzalo, and before actually like 5 minutes before Alexander got on we were having a private talk on the streaming software. That's how we're communicating, via the streaming software. Gonzalo, you were giving your take about the economic situation. I was kind of filling you in.
Yes.
We talked about the oil, we talked about the dollar, and all of these things. Do you want to give your take, Gonzalo, as to how you see things? I was filling you in a little bit. I don't know if Alexander, you want to fill in any other pieces about the economic situation.
I think worldwide inflation. German producer prices in March increased by 30%. Now that is the highest rate of increase since 1949, since the foundation of the German Federal Republic. German inflation is rising much faster than it did in the 1970s. And in the Netherlands, it's now in double figures, official headline inflation.
That's what I pointed out to Alex, that the Netherlands was claiming that they had 12% inflation. And the thing is, the Dutch are very rigorous and honest about those kinds of things.
Yes.
And not so the rest of Europe. So I think that the Dutch numbers are absolutely true. And I think that the rest of Europe is probably lying. Even the French keep saying that, they have all this nuclear energy and that's why their inflation is much less. I don't believe it. I think that the inflation numbers in the Eurozone are a lot higher. And Alex was telling me before we went live and before you, Alexander, joined us, that the dollar was strengthening against the euro, and also that the ruble was really strong. Now, about the ruble, my thinking is that Elvira, what's her name?
Nabulina. Nabulina.
I have a terrible time with names, but anyway, Elvira Nabulina, she is very, very capable, and so she has a double problem. On the one hand, she wants to keep interest rates high because she wants to keep people plugged in, people in Russia and the rest of the world to a lesser extent, but people in Russia certainly plugged into the ruble. On the other hand, she's going to have to start printing some rubles because she doesn't want the ruble to get that strong. And I don't think that they can do, the Russian central bank can do that kind of fine tuning of being able to dial in the right interest rate in order to soften the ruble and yet at the same time attract capital into Russia. And so I think that she's going to have to do what seems to be contradictory. of upping the interest rates, but putting out more rubles in the foreign exchange markets, because she doesn't want the ruble to go out of sight, which it possibly can. You got to keep in mind, for a central banker, the month of March must have been a complete nightmare for that poor woman, because all of a sudden the ruble went from roughly 80 rubles to the dollar, if I'm not mistaken. It shot up all the way to 145, if I'm not mistaken, and then floated right back down. That must have, that kind of roller coaster ride for a central banker. She wants to slit her wrists. Okay, that kind of thing is not something that any central banker wants to see. And I think also, there's no question in my mind that when the dollar went parabolic against the ruble, that Elvira Nebulina went out there and sold dollars like there's no tomorrow. She must have emptied out her checking account of dollars for the central bank in order to prop up the ruble. Of course, that's what you're going to do if you're the central banker. You're not going to allow your currency to be annihilated in a matter of weeks. But when it was clear that everybody started realizing, hold on a second, the Russians have all these commodities. They're in the driver's seat insofar as commodities are concerned. And the Europeans are, they're the beggars in this relationship. Then all of a sudden, the equations flipped and everybody started getting into rubles. And she didn't want the ruble to get so strong that it prices out the Russian economy. So she's having to do this game that must be really nerve-wracking for her as a central banker. But I was looking at the exchange rate on it was just on Google. It was not, because I don't have access to my old accounts. But on Google, it seemed that it was fairly stable over the last few weeks. It was getting a little strong, but not out of sight strong. That is, it wasn't like 45 rubles to the dollar, which would be a nightmare for Elvira Nebulina. She wants it to be relatively soft. She wants it at 80. That's a nice price, right? And so she has all kinds of problems, but she's in the driver's seat, because even though, and correct me if I'm wrong, I sort of glance at some headlines. The Americans are going to steal those reserves that they sanctioned. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. Sullivan. Yes, Sullivan actually said that there is no possibility of Russia ever recovering those reserves.
Yeah, I know. He said that before my last week, but that's the narrative. Nobody's contradicting that, right? That's where we're headed, right? Because that would be the greatest theft in world history.
Yes.
That is the largest single theft in human history.
Yes.
That's incredible, man. Anyway, to get back to the economic issue, Alex mentioned how the dollar was strengthening vis-a-vis the euro. I think what it is institutional money. I don't have access to the numbers. This is an educated guess or an educated speculation, call it what you will, but it seems reasonable that the institutional investors would have been rotating out of euro bonds and euro-denominated assets into dollar-denominated assets, especially the big insurance companies, because they probably see what's coming, and so they probably want to keep their dry powder. They want to keep it in dollars because they figure that this wave, this inflation, this commodity-driven inflation that is going to be hitting Europe and the United States eventually. When I say eventually, I mean by the end of the year, not like 5-10 years from now. I'm talking now, okay?
Yeah.
But I think this big wave of inflation is going to hit Europe first, and then it'll hit the Americas. And so I think that what the institutional money is thinking is, get out of the euro now, get into the dollar. Let's see what happens with the euro. And at the moment is right, we'll get out of whatever dollar positions we have into something else. But the issue becomes, of course, what is this something else? And that's an issue. It could be, and I'm spitballing here, and I haven't seen the index numbers that might confirm this. So really take this with a boulder of salt. But it could be that come September, August, between July and September, a lot of this institutional money starts to see, hey, the dollar is starting to inflate. food prices are rising. Let's exit our dollar positions and get into big commodity positions. And it becomes a self-reinforcing spiral where all of this institutional money exits the dollar, exits treasury bonds, and goes into commodities, into of course futures. Okay, because for those of you who listen, it's not that people go out and buy a ton of aluminum or 1,000 barrels of oil. No, they buy futures, which are just contracts. It's just paper money, paper assets. And so I would think that they would do that in the third quarter of the year. And this might prove even worse for inflation of the dollar by the end of the year. You see my rationale?
Absolutely. Can I just say, first of all, Gonzalo, and I just want to make this observation. After all you've been through over the last few days, your mental energy astonishes me. And I think I really want to say that you're able to talk about these
Alexander,
things.
Alexander, you totally don't get it, man. Because you know what this is like for me? This is like being in junior high and talking about favorite rock bands. This is fun. I could do this all day, okay? And poor Chad, you're gonna have to listen to this garbage of me because I love talking about this stuff, and I can go on for ages. It's a mental break for me, believe me. So I just want to make sure that I'm not boring people silly with this.
You're not boring anybody. Gonzalo, I'm going to flesh out some of the things you've said, which to a great extent corroborate the point that you made. Now, a few days ago, Maxim Oreshkin, who is one of Putin's economic advisors, said that the enormous problem that Russia has at the moment, the single biggest problem in its financial system, is that Russia currently is running a absolutely gargantuan trade surplus because Western companies have pulled out of Russia. Imports are far down, and the Russian exports have to some extent been affected in terms of volumes. They have increased massively in terms of price. So Russia is running a gargantuan trade surplus at the moment. The problem is that the money that's pouring into Russia at a speed that nobody has ever seen in dollars and euros is money that they cannot place outside Russia, because if they do, then it could be confiscated. It could be seized under sanctions, as we've seen has happened previously. So this money this foreign currency is piling up in Russia. Can't be used there because, of course, Russia's currency is the euro, is the ruble. It's not dollars and euros. But if it's all converted into rubles, then you could easily see the ruble rise to 45 rubles to the dollar.
Oh yeah, but Alexander, there's one thing you're missing. I think you're missing, and I think a lot of economists are missing. Do you know where you would go and park all those dollars? China.
Well, I know.
China. Because right now they are not on the they're beginning on the sanctions escalator, that wonderful phrase of yours. But they can go to China and say, look at all these dollars we got.
Yes.
Give me RMB or get me, whatever, and do something with these dollars and these euros that I can't do anything with, but you can.
Yes.
And we'll come up with some sort of mechanism to swap out. That's the way it would be done. And this capital for the Chinese, they could put it to good use, and it's it's all good for both parties. You see what I'm saying?
I've no doubt at all that that's happening, by the way. But of course, to sort this all out in terms of the volumes of currency that is pouring into Russia at the moment is going to take a couple of weeks or months to sort out. And that's the other thing I wanted to say, because of course Nabolina has also been speaking, and we've also now got a fair idea of what happened in March. And over the course of March, Nabolina did exactly what you said. She increased the interest rates to 20%. She's now shaved them down to 17%, by the way, as the underlying inflation rate in Russia has started to fall. The headline numbers are still going up, but the actual rate of increase is now dipping. In fact, it's starting to go downward. And at the same time, she increased liquidity throughout the banking system. She actually did exactly what you said. She increased interest rates, but at the same time, essentially printed rubles. Now, I understand that process stopped sometime in March. What is happening is that simultaneously with the current account, Russia's current account, going to gigantic surplus, the Russian budget has also been going into gigantic surplus. And that is providing an enormous amount of funds on the fiscal side, which the Russian government is using to flood the economy. So that's what they're doing at the moment. Now, it's going to be a difficult balancing act, exactly as you said, but that at the present time is what they're doing. As for the Europe,
yeah, there's something else too that has to be pointed out. See, when you have like Russian inflation, last I heard was around 17% annualized, right? And that kind of inflation is high in most developed economies. It would be, political suicide. But in Russia, because of the current situation with this conflict, and because the political wind is at Putin and the Kremlin's back, and Nabulina's back as well, in that the Russian people approve of what's going on, support it. They were very badly disabused by the Europeans and their sanctions and their Russophobia. All of this has contributed to the Russians, fervently supporting their government. Whatever you think of the government, that's not the issue. The issue is the reality of the situation. The Russian public, you like it or not, are totally behind Putin. The numbers prove it. And therefore, they're going to have even more leeway insofar as what they pursue into the future. And because the people are so in favor of the government, any setback along the way, the people will just shrug it off. Unlike what is going to happen in the Western societies, where this inflation is starting to have a huge backlash. And we haven't even come close to either the inflation, the peak of the inflation, or the peak of the backlash. And so we're about to enter in the West a period of enormous internal political instability, whereas the Russians are basically, they're all united. And whatever comes their way, negatively speaking, the people and the government will all shrug it off. And so you have, it's very important to understand how in the West, it's going to cause enormous political instability and potentially some institutional collapse, dare I say, in certain aspects of the Western regimes. Whereas in Russia, it's smooth sailing as far as I can see. And again, I have to insist, I'm just stating this as a dispassionate observer. I'm not in favor or against anybody. I'm just saying, looking at the chessboard as it stands right now, this is my thinking. What do you guys think?
Alexander, you have to unmute.
Yeah, unmute. That's right.
Okay,
I think that's right. What I just wanted to say is this. I mean, Russian inflation is a complex story because I understand that consumer goods have increased radically in value. Many consumer goods, particularly those which relied upon Western imported subcomponents. And, Nabulina gave an example, for example, that, if you're talking about the garment industry, Russia produces most of its own clothes, but it imported buttons from the European Union. Strange things like that.
Really?
So they have to set up their own production of buttons. Easy to do, not particularly difficult, won't take very long. Somebody's going to do it. Some private enterprise or operation is going to do. Some entrepreneur is going to make a huge amount of money. But in the meantime, there is shortages of garments, and those that do exist are going to be more costly. That's a given. But other parts of the economy, the retail economy, food and energy, which Russia has in abundance, the staples there in food and, of course, in oil and such things, at the moment they are remaining reasonably stable. So they provide an anchor which prevents the whole inflation cycle spiraling upwards. And at the same time, it also provides some protection in terms of living standards. The Russians will get over this. There's been some debate about how long it will take. The prime minister seems to think it will take 6 months. Nabolina seems to think it will take a bit longer, perhaps a year. The most pessimistic is Alexei Kudrin, who was the finance minister in the 2000s, who many people see as pro-Western. He thinks it will take about 2 years, but even he thinks that the Russians will do it. So, the Russians do expect that one way or another, their economy will be able to stabilize within a relatively short time. I mean, 6 months to 2 years in this kind of scenario, it's not a catastrophe, as the Russians themselves would say. Now, in the West, I'm afraid you're absolutely right. We are now in a structural inflation crisis, and we're only at the beginning of it. And if we do eventually start cutting ourselves off from Russian oil and Russian gas, well, we're going to make our problems far bigger. And of course, that's not just us saying that. That's now Janet Yellen as well. But I can't believe that even her wise counsels are going to prevail in the hysterical atmosphere we have at the moment. And by the way, I share yes, indeed. And by the way, I also share completely your cynicism about the inflation numbers we're getting in the West. I and certainly in the European Union. I do not believe that if producer prices in Germany are rising at the rate of 30% a month, that retail prices are only rising at a level of about 8%. I think even that discrepancy is too great, even at this rather early stage in the inflation cycle.
Sorry. Hello?
Yes, we're all ears, Gonzalo. We're all ears.
Oh, no. I don't have anything to add insofar as this is concerned. I'd just be repeating what I said. What other thing happened this week? You see, chat. This is what I do. People don't know this, but every week I call up Alex and Alexander, and I say, "Well, what happened this week?" And they tell me, and then I start like spitballing and bullshitting my way through the show.
Well, let's
and that's how it happens. That's how the magic is made.
Let's do this, Gonzalo. Let's ask the chat what news topics you would like Gonzalo and Alexander to weigh in on. But while the chat is putting that in, I'll pick the popular topics, and I'll throw it your way. But while we're doing that, there are a lot of questions.
Sorry, there's something that came up here. Somebody said here in the chat that Imran Khan is going to be on George Galloway. I was supposed to be on George Galloway's show last Sunday.
On Friday.
And
last Sunday. Sorry.
I saw earlier this incredibly kind statement from George. And I just want to, George, I hope that you hear this, and somebody here in chat, please clip this part here and send it to him, please. I implore you. George, thank you so much for your kind wishes. And thank you so much for having, put such a spotlight on me. I owe you a show, and I am a man of my word, and I will be on your show if you'll have me, of course. And I promise I am going to prepare like quips and jokes, and it's going to be the best show you ever had, because I can never repay you for your kindness and how you made such a big fuss, which I think that big fuss that I certainly think that you were a big impetus in that fuss has really helped me out. So George, I owe you a show, and I can't wait to see you. And see you virtually, of course. And I thank you. I thank you so much. And if it's true that Imran Khan is going to be on George Galloway's show, I think it's going to be a great show. And I fervently endorse George, and I wish him just the best with his interview with Imran Khan. Yeah. Sorry about that. I just wanted to get that.
No, super. Yeah, he did. He did say a lot of very kind words and very encouraging words about you, Gonzalo, and about getting your release. So George Galloway was really one of those voices that was speaking up for your safety. Alexander, since you have a photographic memory, I'm going to throw some topics your way, and then you and Gonzalo can talk about them. I'm just looking in the chat. I see Finland and Sweden, NATO. I see Julian Assange. I see Mariupol and Azovstal. I also see the recent fires in the Russian military research centers. 2 fires that broke off. Let me see some other topics.
Fire where? In the Russian what?
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Yes, this is an interesting story. This is very recent, actually, to today, pretty much. And what else do we see? I think those are the ballistic weapons, the Samrat and the ballistic weapons. Okay, so those are good topics. Before you guys get into it, I just want to say that we have a lot of super chats coming in, a lot of well wishes for you, Gonzalo, and some questions. The questions we'll figure out a way to answer the questions in a later show or video. But Gonzalo, what do you say if I gather all the super chats and we donate them to some sort of charity or cause? I don't know if you want to pick the cause, Gonzalo, or if you would like me to donate it to something here, like a church or some cause here.
Well,
I leave it to you.
That's very kind of you. I very much appreciate that very kind offer of you both. I know that you both have thought of this idea, and yes, I don't know which charity, to tell you the truth, because you
want to leave it to me.
Leave it to you, but the charity that I want to support is for the family members of anybody who has been harmed, or anybody who's been in a situation that I have, that they have been snatched up for relatively trivial reasons, not committing any crime as you would properly define it, but rather speaking their mind and pointing to things that were wrong or untrue and trying to make them right. I hate all of these, organized charities like, I don't know, Amnesty International or whatnot.
No, we're not gonna.
They always feel like a grift for the.
We're not going to give it there. We're not. That's for sure.
No, I know you guys are. You guys, you and I, think the same in that regard. But I'd like it to be something like that, or also Julian Assange. What has happened to Julian Assange? He is going to be, as I understand it, he's going to be extradited to the United States to stand trial on espionage charges, which makes absolutely no sense because, number one, Julian Assange is not an American citizen. He is an Australian citizen. Number two, he has never spied for anyone. He simply passed along and published information that other people had obtained. And so then the notion that he is a spy is absurd. The notion that he should be tried in an American court, which has no jurisdiction, is absurd. And I think that that would be, if you can divvy it up, give a piece to the legal defense of Julian Assange. I know, Alexander, you know the people there, if not personally, you know them, indirectly.
Yes.
Who are defending Julian Assange.
Because I know some of them. Yes, I absolutely do know some of them. Yes.
Yeah. And Alexander, correct me if I'm wrong in what I said about Julian Assange, that there's no legal basis for what is happening to him, and it's a disgrace.
I am absolutely of that view. I think it is an absolute disgrace. I did a discussion of his case. You can find it on Consortium News. I did it a couple of months ago, and you can see it there. I am fully in agreement of what you have said, and of course, his lawyers are going to need a lot of money to fight whatever comes, either in America or in Britain. They do get a lot of funding from various sources, but I just
good.
Say that.
Then do this. Can you I hate to put this like this, but would it be possible for a sizable fraction to be devoted to Eva Bartlett? Eva Bartlett is a journalist who is going to the Donbass regularly. And she is, at sixes and sevens insofar as funding is concerned. She could really use that to do her reporting. And she's somebody whom I respect and trust. And I think that she would be a deserving person. And as well as what's his name? Lancaster. My memory is slipping. What's his name? Peter, right?
Patrick.
I'm sorry. I'm like I said, I'm a little bit. But anyway, Patrick Lancaster. Another man. That guy. I'm sorry for being so vulgar when I say this, but it's the truth. That guy has balls. That guy, dude. He's all kinds of ballsy, and he has shown a lot of stuff So Eva and Patrick, you have my warmest regards and my absolute respect, and keep on doing what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
We'll take care of it. Okay. So I gave you some news topics, Alexander.
Yes,
So
I
the
just
news
wanted to add
topics,
one, which I've
yeah.
noticed nobody has mentioned, which is, of course, the French election, which is coming up very soon.
Yeah, it's in the chat too. It's, yeah,
It's
yeah.
in the
That's my
chat
bad.
too.
That's my
I
bad.
mean,
Yeah, it's French
yeah.
election.
I mean, and I just wanted to say very briefly, they had that debate, Macron and Le Pen on Wednesday. I think by most people would concede it wasn't a knockout from either side. I personally take the view that Le Pen came out with the edge. I thought that she's not a debater like Macron is, but I think that she said more things that are more more relevant to the lives of people in France. And I have to say that I still think, though, Macron will win in the end, because the institutional weight of events is just too strong in France for Le Pen to overcome. But an upset is not impossible. And if it happens, it's very connected to the inflation crisis that we were talking about before. Now, lots of other topics, lots of other things.
Now,
people
about
would say.
Le Pen and Macron.
Yeah, Macron.
Alex told me about the results, and it's very much in line with what you said. And so,
Yeah.
from my perspective, my thinking is that if Le Pen were to win, the bureaucracy, the entrenched bureaucracy, French bureaucracy, would go out of its way to block any initiative she might have. So
Yes.
it would be a repeat of the Trump presidency. And so I frankly, I think it's almost a pointless election. Macron wins and they go steady as she goes. Le Pen wins and they block her and they do all kinds of things. I mean, she isn't going to be able to do anything because she doesn't have that depth of support within the French bureaucracy, which is so powerful in French society. You see what I'm saying?
I absolutely agree. I mean, in fact, I'm going to say something else. I mean, there's going to be a massive attempt at that point afterwards, if she were to win, to make sure that her party loses in the French parliamentary election. And I've now been seeing some moves by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and it's quite clear to me that he's maneuvering now, very obviously, to win a majority for his left party in the French parliamentary elections, which presumably will follow sometime in the summer, whoever wins. And that regardless, I mean, when you talk about what happened to Trump in the US, what's going to happen to a President Le Pen in France is going to make what was done to Trump seem frankly minor. And of course, the bureaucracy in Paris will have the support of the EU bureaucracy in Brussels. And I mean, it's going to be
absolutely right. I hadn't thought of that.
It's going to be absolutely enormous. And what I would say, though, is I still think it will be an enormous electoral shock. I mean, that's the other thing to say. I mean, I think that the Brussels, shall we say, and its supporters, its fan club around the world, will not be happy. Anyway, that's what I'm going to say about that. I mean, we may have much more to say about the French elections going forward, but that's one thing I wanted to say. Second is about just to deal with a few quick things. The Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile that was tested. The Russians tested it a day or so ago. This is the most powerful intercontinental ballistic missile ever built. It's not even, properly speaking, an intercontinental ballistic missile, because it has global reach. It can reach, not just go across continents, it can reach right anywhere in the globe. And it's capable of circumnavigating. It's of going over the South Pole and striking the United States from the south, where, of course, the U.S. air defense and anti-missile systems, they don't have their radars. They're all looking north. So there's a massive thing. Now, what you probably aren't aware of, Gonzalo, is that there's been lots of talk over the last couple of days about the Russians supposedly desperate, supposedly losing the war in Ukraine, contemplating the use of nuclear weapons in
What?
tactical nuclear weapons to win in Ukraine. There's been, well, I mean, even no less a person than the director of the CIA, William Burns, actually seemed to give some life to that particular story. I mean, it was a crazy one. The Russians have said this is ridiculous, that they have no such plans, but that they consider it to be an example of mirror imaging. And I think that's probably true.
Yes.
So I think, and Alex thinks, we both think that the Sarmat test was not just part of this missiles, test program. It was both.
Right.
It was also a warning and a reminder that if anybody has any such ideas.
Yeah, before we got on live, Alex was telling me about this missile, and he mentioned that it had a range of 18,000 kilometers. Is that correct?
Yes. That's correct. Yes.
Okay, because I just Googled this. I don't know this off the top of my head, but let's pretend that I did. But I just Googled the circumference of the Earth, which is 40,000 kilometers. So this missile can literally reach the antipode rather of wherever it's fired. It can literally go around the Earth.
Yes,
that is a powerful weapon. Okay,
absolutely.
But anyway, I don't think it's ballistic. Then it must be some sort of like glider, because a ballistic missile would literally get to the moon and back. But anyway, that's not important. The important thing is that if they have a missile like this, I think that you might be right, because to make such a test at such a weird moment, because this is a major test, because this is a major weapon system. So to make such a test now, it doesn't make sense. No. You see what I'm saying? Unless you're trying to send a very, very clear message.
Yes. I would also add, by the way, that it carries hypersonic warheads. So it has this enormous reach, and it carries hypersonic warheads as well. So it's got tremendous power and potential. But so I think that's what that's all about. And I agree. Now, Finland, Sweden joining NATO. I think this has been worked on for a very long time. I think this has been a plan that's been worked on in Sweden and Finland. The political class there have gradually been won over to this for a very long time. I think that Ukraine has provided both a pretext, but also in terms of bringing it on now, it's a kind of consolation prize for the NATO bureaucracy, because they are losing Ukraine. Now, I've had discussions with people about this. I want to stress again, I am not a military person. But what I understand is this: from a Russian point of view, having Ukraine join NATO would be an existential crisis. It's huge. Its location means that you put missiles there, you can reach right to the heart of the most important areas of Russia. That would have been a disaster for them. Having Finland and Sweden in NATO is not existential in the same way. More importantly, it simplifies Russian military planning, because if there were ever to be a third world war, which heaven forbid, the major battleground, it looks like, conventional battleground, would no longer be in Central Europe, but it would be in the Arctic. It would be useful for Russia, to say it straightforwardly, to occupy the Scandinavian peninsula. Doing that would have been extremely difficult while Finland and Sweden were neutral. So given the overwhelming preponderance of Russian power in this region, actually having Finland and Sweden in NATO actually simplifies Russian strategic planning. I don't want to give the impression that this is what the Russians want to see, but it's something that I have heard, and I believe it to be true.
I'm not 100% on this, to tell you the truth, because I've always felt that, Finland and Russia have deep financial ties and cultural ties.
Yes.
Regardless of the unpleasantness of 1939, 1940.
Yeah.
Finland and Russia go a long ways back, even before the end of the Soviet Union. And so the Russians always viewed Finland as a buffer zone.
Yes.
And so for the Finns
Yes.
to
Yes.
decide to, join NATO, I think it's foolish of them. I think it's reckless.
Oh.
And the thing is, having a neutral buffer in Finland, kept NATO at bay, kept them, in Norway.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, Norway is a NATO member, right? I forget
it is absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And so Sweden and Finland officially joining NATO, because there was always the fiction that they weren't NATO, but they did join NATO. They were NATO interoperable, and so there was the fiction, and also it just reduced tension. Having them join NATO just amps up the tension, even if it's really a bureaucratic move. As a practical military matter, nothing really changes. It just increases the political tension, which I think is foolish. That's that there. So I'm not really sure that the Russians are. They might view it as simplification, but you have to understand now. All of a sudden, NATO can put, surface to surface missiles, right there in front of St. Petersburg.
Yes.
Okay. That's not something we really like. Okay. I mean, nobody would like it. So it is a provocation. And the other point I most vehemently disagree with you is that you talk about the Third World War as a future event, hopefully an event that won't happen. My friend, and you know how much I respect you, but I do believe that we are in the Third World War. It has been going on ever since this special military operation started, and there's no end in sight. It's economic, it's political, it's military, it's social.
Yes.
I think that we haven't even started to see the real social warfare that's going to start breaking out on both sides of the divide, by the way. There are going to be people in China, in Russia, that are not happy with the situation on that side of the divide, just as on the Western side, there are a whole host of people, ourselves included, by the way, who reject a mainstream narrative, who reject the blob or the swamp, or call it what you will, and so it's the Third World War is happening already. That's I'm telling you this with the deepest respect and regard, of course, but that's how I see it. I think that we're there. We just have to admit it to ourselves and start picking sides and figuring out how we're going to fight this thing, because it's happening.
Yes, I mean, I what I meant to say was, I mean, outright, all-out combat operations between the Western powers and the Russians. We're not quite there yet, and that's what I meant. I hope we don't get that.
No, Alexander, we're there. We're there. Yeah. You have to keep in mind, the Ukrainian armed forces were NATO trained, NATO equipped. Yes, they used a Russian tanks, Soviet tanks. Yes. But in terms of communications and command and control, it was NATO. They were trained to NATO interoperability standards. And here's something key. The Ukrainian armed forces were the only ones of NATO's forces that had actual combat experience. Because between 2013 and up until this point, they had this relentless grind in the Donbass. That had gotten hotter in 2014, 15, and then cooled down, but it was still relentless over the past 9 years. And now we have open war. These are the best, most experienced fighters that NATO had. If you think of it in those terms, then you understand why NATO decided deliberately not to get involved in this fight, because NATO was involved. And they got their behinds handed to them by the Russians in what is proving to be one of the most remarkable military encounters in the last 100 years.
Well, yes. Sorry. No, I am. I'm not. I am unmuted. Yes. Well, I hear all that, Gonzalo. I stand corrected. Let me put it like that.
It's not like it's just a point of view. It's not like a competition.
But anyway, just to deal with those two other points, the buffer zone point.
Yeah.
And I want to stress again, the Russians do not want to see Finland and Sweden joining NATO. They've never had a good relationship with Sweden. The two countries have never particularly got on. But with Finland, as you rightly say, they have historically had a good and friendly relationship. So that will be a blow to them. And that there is no question at all. But in military terms, and this is, I think, an important thing, it's probably less important now than it was during the Cold War, when the major front was in Central Europe. Because at that point, the Russians would not have wanted a NATO counterattack, if you like, through Scandinavia, whilst they were focused on the Central Front. Whereas today, to say it straightforwardly, it is in the Arctic and in the North Atlantic that the major battle would take place. And as I said, having to skirt Finland and Sweden would have been more of a problem than a solution. Now, on the question of the missiles, NATO planting missiles and nuclear weapons in Finland, that obviously is a major concern. But of course, those weapon systems would also be much more easily targeted for the Russians than if they were further west. So I think that this is a concern. I don't want to underestimate these problems.
No,
but I don't think it is as existential for them as it would have been if Ukraine had gone into NATO. All the more so, of course. I mean, we talk about cultural links between Finland and Russia. The cultural links between Ukraine and Russia are orders of magnitude stronger. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to say about that. What I would say is I completely agree with you about Finland and Sweden making crazy and stupid decisions. And if you look at Finland, I mean, it looks to me as if Finland, which once upon a time had serious people leading it. I mean, I remember President Kekkonen. I mean, today, the current Finnish government, I understand the prime minister is in her mid-30s. They look like,
she's a party girl. You're too polite. She is a party girl.
Well, they look to me to be a collection of Annalena Baerbock's, to be straightforward. I mean, they're at that level. I mean, they're as you said, dizzy. They want to be invited to all the right parties. Those parties don't happen in Moscow, if you like. They happen in Brussels and wherever, New York, and that seems to be the sort of idea there. I mean, it's stupid and crazy, and I think one day people in Finland are going to wake up, and of course they're not going to be consulted because it's not going to be a referendum on anything like this, because that's obviously you don't consult your people when you make these major
of course
decisions.
not.
That would be outrageous. That would be anti-democracy. It would open the way to populists. Exactly, it would open the way to populists and people of that kind,
people determining their own destiny? What outlandish tish-tosh!
Yeah, I did. And if you had the wrong result after a referendum, well, you'd have to go to all the trouble and expense of having the referendum all over again. So you don't want the referendum. So exactly. So we're going to have the decision made and pushed on the Finnish people and the Swedish people. And of course, it's going to be a very bad decision. And it's going to complicate their lives and make them different from what they were. And it's going to make Finland, which had a very distinct personality and culture. I don't know Sweden very well. I've been to Finland several times, and it's a likable place. I liked it. It's going to make it less different and quirky and interesting and attractive, and it's going to make it part of the homogenized Europe that Euro-Atlantic Europe that we've seen. Always assuming that things don't escalate to the point where the crisis gets to the kind of beyond control levels where we really all are wondering whether anything matters anymore. But anyway, that's what I wanted to say about that. Now, Alex, I don't have a photographic memory. You mentioned other topics.
Neither do I. There's Boris's trip to India actually today,
Oh
which is
yeah, oh yeah, yeah,
Modi,
absolutely.
which is an
Boris,
Going
interesting
to
yes,
topic.
India?
yes,
Well,
yes.
what's
Okay,
what's he going there to get? Like a sari or
well,
something?
right. What he's going there to do, he's got two reasons to go. Firstly, this is a point which, again, I perhaps should say, we have a political crisis in Britain. We're having a cost of living crisis. The economy is going to pieces. The Conservative Party has now turned on Boris Johnson. There's an absolutely ridiculous scandal here about the fact that he had parties in the gardens of 10 Downing Street. They weren't really parties; they were sort of social gatherings in the gardens of 10 Downing Street during the pandemic lockdowns, which broke the law. But you know, it's not, I think, people's major concern at the moment. But the important thing was there was a debate in the House of Commons. It became very clear that the Conservative Parliamentary Party was not supporting Johnson and supported the opposition's call for a further investigation into whether or not Johnson misled Parliament about this. If, by the way, the investigation decides sorry, apologies. That he did mislead Parliament. I mean, he's over. I mean, he's gone. He won't be able to remain Prime Minister. That's my assessment, anyway. So he is in very, very serious political difficulties indeed, and I think this particular event has been brought up because, again, the political system senses that he's overcommitted Britain to this policy over Ukraine, and I don't think there's going to be any change in the policy, but I think that they want to basically have him as the fall guy for it. So he's gone to India because it's a big country. It's the Conservative Party has been trying to get the support of the Indian community in Britain. There are various Indian people of Indian extraction in the government. Rishi Sunak, our finance minister, Syed Javid, who is our health secretary. So he's going to India partly for that reason, partly for domestic political reasons. The other is India is the rising power. We want to develop economic and trade relations with India. Importantly, before going to India, he said that he would not lecture India over Ukraine and Russia. So I'm assuming that
He
the
said that
Indians told him.
explicitly.
He said that explicitly. So
Right.
I assume that what happened is that the Indian government made it very clear to the British government that if Johnson was coming to India trying to persuade the Indians to change their policy, then he would not be welcome in India and they would call the trip off.
Yeah, I think that I've never really respected Boris Johnson. He seemed more like a buffoon than
Yeah.
than a real leader. I don't have a problem with doing the populist gesture.
Yeah.
I remember once, I think for the Olympics, as mayor of London, he had himself helicoptered in or something like that, waving a little. I thought that was amusing. Many people thought that, oh, it was beneath the dignity of the office, but I don't have a problem with a politician, mixing it up and acting, playing a bit of the buffoon. And also, many times, some of the smartest people you'll ever meet go around the world pretending to be buffoons so that nobody realizes how truly clever they are. But my thinking about Boris Johnson is that he's an incredibly disorganized man who has no follow through. He will, it's always a flash in the pan, but no stake or I don't know how to continue the metaphor, but you know what I'm saying. And so the fact that he's going to India, what exactly is the point except nothing?
No.
The Indians have already made it clear that they are not going to play ball with the Western sanction regime against Russia because of longstanding ties with Russia. Let me phrase it. First of all, there's the obvious economic interest of the Indians vis-a-vis the Russians. Secondly, there is a longstanding psychological issue between the political class in India and Russia, which has always supported them. through thick and thin, especially with their dealings with India's dealings with Pakistan, which is the erstwhile American ally. The Russians have always been with the Indians, and they've always tried to smooth things over between the Indians and the Chinese. So the Indian political class has a lot of good feeling for Russia, and they're not going to antagonize it for no reason. And they also realize, the Indian leadership realizes, that if they fold insofar as Western pressure, they're going to be next. And so it's better to take the hit now than later, and make it clear to your friends, i.e. the Russians, that you are going to stand with them. And so when things get rough for the Indians, they're going to be hoping that the Russians stand with them, and the Russians will. And so, I think that the Indian issue is over. And the only thing that we should be waiting for insofar as India is for them to come to a settlement with the Chinese over the water rights issues in the Himalayas. That's a big issue, because for those of you who don't know, the Chinese in the Himalayas, in their territory, have diverted some of the water flow from the Himalayas to hydroelectric dams that are very beneficial to the Chinese, but of course hurts the Indians, because it dams up that water flow that the Indians need for agriculture in the north of India, which is heavily populated. And so they are very nervous about that, and that has caused a great deal of tension between China and India. And I suspect, this is a speculation on my part, but I suspect that, seeing how things are playing out, the Chinese will play it smart and realize that they're going to negotiate with the Indians, and they are going to cede on a lot of issues so as to cement a strong relationship with India, just as the Chinese ceded on a lot of issues with Russia back in the 90s when they were having the border dispute issues, and Russia at that time was figuratively on its back and did not really have much muscle, and the Chinese, instead of taking advantage of this, played the long game, gave up some of their aspirations insofar as territory, which they ceded to the Russians, but which those sacrifices that they made back in the 90s have paid off huge today. The Chinese know how to play the long game, and so I suspect they'll do the same with the Indians. And so this tripartite alliance between India, China, and Russia, I think it's in the process of development. And if the British Prime Minister thinks that he's going to go there and actually affect that development, he's a fool. And if it will do anything other than postpone the inevitable for his government, he's a fool. Yeah, that's my thinking on that issue. Hello?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Alexander's muted.
Muted.
Okay.
There was one other thing which I remember, which is these fires in the
fires. Yeah, I think that's the last topic. Yeah, the fires
in Tver. There's
fires? I'm sorry.
Right. So there was a military scientific center in Tver, which is in Russia. Obviously, it's in central Russia, which caught fire, and some people were burnt there, and there was some damage done, and some people were injured. And it's an important for scientific establishment. And there is also a big factory there which produces nitrates, which are, of course, important for rocket engines. And there was a fire there as well, it seems. Now, I have to say the Russians are saying incredibly little about this, but it was a big story in some parts of the media, particularly on Zero Hedge, I noticed. I think the subtext to some of these stories is that these particular fires may have been the work of saboteurs, Ukrainian saboteurs. It's possible. I don't know. I don't think it will make any significant difference to the war until we know more about what these fires were all about. I think it's difficult to come to any kind of conclusions. The Russian media has barely registered the story.
I have something to add to that. As I understand it, I could be wrong, but nitrates are essential as a fertilizing agent, right?
Fertilizing, well, yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
It look, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, as they say.
Yes, yeah.
It could be that this is genuinely just an accident. It could also be. We should always remember that many times a cover-up is not because of some nefarious plot going on, but just to cover up embarrassment. and incompetence. That happens all the time. And so it could very well be that whoever is trying to keep a lid on this, because it was just a stupid incompetence, and it doesn't mean anything, no sabotage, nothing. But of course, the cover-up sometimes causes a lot more attention to be drawn to something that is fundamentally trivial. But unless it has an actual impact on the war effort, or an actual impact on fertilizer production, I don't see much of a story, to tell you the truth. An industrial accident, but that's based on the information you've given me, because I have no idea about this stuff.
Well, exactly. And in fact, we've had very little real information. As I said, I have to say, industrial accidents like this happen all the time. We're less used to them in Britain than we used to be, because, to be straightforward about it, we don't have these giant factories in Britain anymore. But if you did once upon a time, you would. I can remember they were not that uncommon. So I wouldn't place too much weight on this story. What I would say is, if the Ukrainians did manage a sabotage operation there, well, they're good at that sort of thing. I mean, and I think that the Ukrainians have shown in the past that they do have, very committed people who are prepared to carry out these kind of operations. Tver is not. It's
close to Moscow.
Central Russia. It's close to
Moscow.
Yeah.
I don't think it was sabotage. I think the Ukrainians would try to sabotage something a lot closer, something that would actually affect the military performance of the Russians. Something that far away and obscure, it just doesn't. I mean, I could be completely wrong.
I'm inclined to agree, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. For instance, those very, very daring helicopter pilots who flew to Belgorod and blew up those oil depots that turned out to be civilian oil depots, but they didn't know, or whatever. Brave, and it made sense militarily.
Yes.
Nitrate factory close to Moscow. I don't know. It just.
I agree with that. I have.
By the
to
way,
say,
has Biden done any more gaffes? Has he acted like a bigger idiot than usual?
So it's hard to keep up.
I don't know whether you caught the very weird thing where he was shaking air. His hand was shaking. An invisible person. Yes, Alex, do you want to describe this? You're better at these kinds.
I mean, how can you describe it? He was giving a speech.
Right.
When he finished his speech, he turned to his right side, and he just put his hand out as if he's going to shake someone's hand, but there was no one there, and he just sat there for like 10 seconds. And then he kind of wandered a little bit to the back of the podium. He didn't know where to go, and then they kind of directed him off the stage.
Wait,
it was just
nobody else there on stage.
No, he was in front of the podium, giving his speech. He finishes his speech.
What was behind him? Was there more people, or what?
No, it was just like your typical backdrop. It was like a typical like a poster, like a banner thing in the backdrop, and a couple of people, placed in the back area. But there was no one on stage with him. He was by himself. And he just turns to his right side or his left side, whatever, and puts his hand out. And I mean,
air. Oh man!
Like I don't know if you can see me now, Gonzalo. He just kind of turns and puts his hand there, and
that's sad.
And it just lingered for like 5-10 seconds, like his hand was just sitting there.
Look, I always thought that
weird.
The first time I noticed Joe Biden was during the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas hearings back in 1991. I thought he was just the most disgusting person imaginable. He just seemed like such a corrupt politician, just looking at him. But I never gave him another thought. But now to see him like this, I still despise him as a politician, but you have to feel sorry for him as a human being, because we are all going to be like that eventually. I mean, if we're lucky enough to live to old age, we are all going to be, a shadow of what we once were. And to be paraded around and humiliated like this, I hope I don't live to see that, because I mean that's just sad. That to be paraded like that. Oh,
well, he said he's going to run for a second term as well. That's kind of news.
He's not. He's going to resign.
Yeah.
Look, my thinking is January 21st, 2023. Any date after that, his days are numbered. They're waiting around because they have this bizarre notion that they can elect Kamala Harris twice, not once, twice, and they want to get the full 10 years out of her. Because, as you know, I forget which amendment it was, the 26th. But I forgot that the president can only run for 2 consecutive terms, but he can wind up serving 10 years in total if he replaces a former president and serves out 1 day less than 2 years, 1 day less than half the term. Yeah. But Kamala Harris is going to be the next president, which I find shocking. It's just inconceivable, and I do believe it's going to happen as a result of the catastrophic November 2022 midterms. And I have to be, you two gentlemen are always so measured, always so thoughtful, and I'm the loose cannon here, so I'll be the one who says it. I just believe that the Democratic Party and the institutionalized Democrats in the deep state regime are going to figure out a way to cheat in a lot of those House and Senate seats. And what should be clearly a supermajority for the Republican Party, they are going to somehow figure out a way to steal it. I know that that's tinfoil hat territory, but I've got to say it. And chat, if you believe I'm speaking the truth, hit +1. Because if you think I'm just crazy, hit 0. But that's what I truly think, that they're going to figure out a way to do it, because these people are so corrupt that they are going to figure it out. You know what I mean? I mean, they did it in 2020. Let's come on. It cannot be that Joe Biden got more votes than Barack Obama. It's just not possible. Okay, it's just not in this reality. Okay, so anyway, that's what I think. A lot of chat seems to agree with me.
Yeah, there's a plus. I see 1 0 and a lot of +1s.
Plus
+1
one,
++1. Yeah. Do you guys want to try the video for like a few seconds?
Which video?
Video, so people can. Do you want to see if it holds up for like a minute or so? For this.
Okay, well, I'm happy.
I don't know if it'll hold up, but we lost Gonzalo. We had him for like a second.
Okay, well, I'll put it up. There we go.
It doesn't hold up. Yeah,
it doesn't hold up. Yeah.
Tell me more, because like I said before, talking about foreign affairs and politics and all this is just like, it's such a mental relief, because talking about your own problems and whining about them is just so sad. I don't want to be that guy ever. And so let's talk about. By the way, if Boris Johnson, Alexander, if Boris Johnson is on the way out, who are the conservatives putting up?
Well, that is an excellent question, because at the moment they're short of people, because the person that they'd been who had been built up last year as the person who would take over was Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor.
Right.
His reputation, he's collapsed. His reputation has imploded over the last few weeks. His wife, who's immensely rich, was caught in a tax scandal, and that's damaged him. And he's now being increasingly criticized for the problems in the economy. So he doesn't look like he's going to be the next prime minister at all. So we are left with the 2 stars of the British cabinet, the scintillating political colossi, who are Liz Truss and Ben Wallace. I'm really not making that up.
When I think
really
of
am not making that up.
I look up at the sky to see these giant colossi, as you call them correctly, strolling across the globe, with furrowed brow, knowing exactly what they are going to do to make the world a better place for all of humanity. Oh my God.
Yeah, I have to say, I do wonder whether the ultimate objective in much of this is to create some kind of mechanism to make the Labour leader Keir Starmer Prime Minister. In other words, get Johnson out of the way, disorganize the Conservatives, maybe try set up some kind of coalition government or arrange an early election or something like that to make Keir Starmer Prime Minister, in the sense that he is seen as extremely reliable politically. I mean, he would continue the same policies, but that he doesn't defend people in quite the way that Boris Johnson does. And you can, anyway, blame everything that went wrong on Johnson. So I do wonder whether that is the long-term agenda. Sorry?
What happened to Michael Gove?
Oh, he's still around. He's still around, lying very low. Perhaps you must wait. Perhaps he'll come out fighting or roaring if things do turn out the way we said. But at the moment, there isn't very much interest in him. The other person who I find very interesting is Kwasi Kwarteng, who was the business secretary, who last year seemed to be a rising figure in the Conservative Party. Well, he's almost completely disappeared from the media to an extraordinary degree. And again, I don't know why. Maybe he's seen as unreliable in this crisis. But I would have expected that with Sunak out of the way, Kwarteng would be the person. But no, he doesn't seem to be in the running at all.
I get the vibe, and that some of the smarter members of the British Parliament, some of the 1922 committee members, some of the backbenchers, that they're quality people. I think that they might be. I'm thinking like the famous one is Jacob Rees-Mogg, but there's a deep bench there, and I suspect that a lot of them are. They're realizing that over the next couple of years, there's going to be so much of a crisis that it's better not to stick your head out yet. Let the crisis play out. Let the Labour Party have a go at the disaster, and then when that nightmare of a Labour government happens, only then come out and strike and try to pick up the pieces. I think that, how can I put it? See, we three and your audience, we sort of see that there's this big disaster brewing, economically, politically, that the whole old paradigm is collapsing. And we see it, and quite frankly, none of us three and chat included, we're not that bright. We kind of like figured out what's going on, right? And so maybe some of the really smart people in the British government are pretty much on the same page, and they're figuring, maybe let it play out first before making a move. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And Gove might be one of those people who realizes it's going to be such a nightmare over the next 3 to 5 years that maybe it's better to just lie low. And when everything is just, sort of like at the nadir, only then come in like on the white horse to save the day. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I think you may very well be right. I should add that there's also the first indicators of a political crisis in Germany. And there's talk that there's now moves in Germany to get Scholz out of the way. Now, the reason is
we hardly knew ye. What they're going to get rid of Scholz now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, the reason, believe it or not, is because he's not being hard line enough on the Russians. That he's not shipping Leopard tanks and other things to Ukraine. That's the thing that's been spreading around. But of course, the fact is, Germany is heading into a major economic crisis. Bear in mind, the German media is deeply Atlanticist. It may be the most Atlanticist media in the world, actually. I mean, if you think the British and American media are one, mono voiced, one line, the German media, in my experience, is even more so in many respects. So, it's the Atlanticists who are making the running in Germany. But I think what's happening is that Scholz, who I think is frankly rather dim, is finding that trying to appease all sides is failing. He went along with sanctions packages, which he once said that he would never do. And I think he's found that he's now that you can't appease these demands, that always these demands escalate. So the hardliners see him as soft, whereas those forces within Germany who would have supported a chancellor who drew a strong line and said, we're not prepared to take these steps because they're going to jeopardize Germany's future. In other words, German industry and German trade unions. They have lost trust and confidence in him. So he's looking very exposed, and he seems to have alienated all the various big blocs within Germany as well. So it's possible we could see a change of government in Germany. I've always thought that this particular government that was patched together after the German election was not going to survive for very long. I would say that if Scholz falls and if we get a hardliner taking over, I doubt that will be sustainable for very long either. Hello?
I hear you. Gonzalo's muted.
Gonzalo's muted.
Sorry, I just have to mute just briefly. I just continue.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's all I wanted to say. So a crisis, political crisis in Germany, a political crisis in Britain, a sense in the United States that just, I heard all that you said about the midterms, but there's still widespread, universal expectations that the Democrats are going to go crashing in the midterms. Worries in the United States about some of the investigations that are taking place there. I mean, there's the laptop gate investigation, which is underway. Durham has been making big moves in the United States, and there's been all kinds of court filings, which have been very interesting and which point clearly to people at the very top of the Clinton campaign being essentially behind the creation of Russiagate. And we've got to talk now about the creation of Russiagate because
did Durham make any moves? Did something happen on that?
Yes. Well, there's a trial of Michael Sussman, this Perkins Coie lawyer, coming up, and he's been making various filings and also demands for discovery. And there's all sorts of documents and papers that he's looking for. But essentially, what they all seem to point to is that Russiagate was launched not in June or July 2016, as we all thought, but perhaps even in April, and that every element in it seems to have been put together with the purpose of painting Donald Trump as connected to the Russians. Now, it's a very complicated and long story. I made copious notes, which I haven't yet read properly through, but which I'm thinking that we should perhaps do a program about at some point. But it really does all look extremely sinister, very bad for the Clintons, but also ultimately very bad for the administration as well. So you get bad news in the midterms, a very panicked speech by Elizabeth Warren, who seemed to be laying some of the blame on Nancy Pelosi and seemed to be saying, that we mustn't look as if we're involved in financial investment, trading, and that kind of thing, which was clearly referring to Pelosi, as far as I could see. And so a panic statement from Elizabeth Warren, very, very disturbing investigations underway.
How much traction did this get? I mean, let me get this straight. Elizabeth Warren publicly said that Congress people should not be.
Yeah, pretty much. She didn't mention Pelosi by name. When she said, I think she didn't say Congress people. She said we, people, we. In other words, people in Congress. But it was coded. It was coded, thinly coded language. But to answer your question, it didn't get vast amount of traction. It didn't get published very widely because, of course, the media isn't going to, flag up these questions, just as it's not giving a huge amount of weight to what Durham is doing or what indeed is going on with Laptopgate. They're not really reporting these stories. But if the Democrats crash in the midterms and the Republicans gain big majorities in the House and perhaps a working majority in the Senate, then it's possible that all of these investigations could be activated in an even more serious way. And then, of course, things could turn take very dramatic turns.
Jesus.
So
Okay.
crises, political crises, instability in Britain, Germany, and the United States, the three most important countries in the West, and a bitterly contested election in France. And I should say, by the way, that everybody I've spoken to about the situation in France is in agreement that even if Macron wins, which is still, frankly, the overwhelmingly high probability, there will be more political instability in France before very long. More yellow vests protests and that sort of thing.
We hear you, Alexander.
Oh
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we covered a lot of ground.
We have covered a lot of ground.
How are you holding up, Gonzalo? Should we wrap it up?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you mind terribly? Because I do have to talk to you guys about things and.
Yes.
I
have to say, I
reiterate. Oh, go ahead, Alexander.
I have commitments, but I wanted to say to Gonzalo that it has been a massive pleasure, a huge relief to be able to do a live stream with you again.
Me too.
I enjoy a live stream, but to be able to do it again after these rather stressful days, stressful for us. I'm not even going to try and guess how stressful for you. We mustn't probe too much. But it's been a huge pleasure and a huge relief and a joy, in fact.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I just want to say to chat that thank you so much for your support. As I said earlier, it's deeply humbling, and I thank you so much. But I don't know how things are going to play out, but I'm thinking that probably things will be for the best. And so I think that the emphasis should be on people who are still in limbo, people who are still gone. Those are the people that you should be focused on. I mentioned to you guys that I have a new Twitter account. It's Gonzalo Lira 1968, and on that Twitter, I have those people whom you should check out, and some of them have died, and some of them are still with us. And the ones who are still with us, we should support them because their plight is no different from my own. I was just fortunate enough that I have a couple of foreign passports and the support of literally hundreds of thousands of people that I thank so much. But those are the people who are still in trouble. Those are the people that we should be supporting. And so I thank you. Thank you so much. And that's all I have to say.